Welcome to the podcast. Today we're trying something new. We're doing a roundtable, and I've got three guests I'm really excited about. I've got Tim Padgett, Tim Van Meegen, and John Lanier. And what we're talking about is we all serve the middle market, and we talk a lot about companies that are trying to grow and potentially exit, and some things and problems that they run into, and some really great ideas. One of the things I talk about throughout the podcast is they come up with a bunch of lines I'm going to put on a t-shirt. So if anyone's interested in that, give me some likes and comments and we'll get those things made up, because I think there's some good ones. So no further ado, we're going to jump in. I think it's long enough. We're going to split it into two parts. So this is part one of the roundtable with Tim, and John. Let's jump in. Hello and welcome to the Digital Transformist. I'm really excited. We're trying an experiment today. We're doing a roundtable, which I think should be really interesting. I know these guys, these three smiling faces you see here, because we all serve the same market, and we hope that that's you. We all work with middle market companies who are trying to grow and exit, and a lot of what comes with that is figuring out various parts of your business that maybe you need some help with. So that's where we come in. And we've got a couple questions we're going to work through today. So we'll be short on intros, and then we'll jump into some of those questions. So obviously, I'm Mike Vista, and our company focuses on operational excellence within your technology and software stack. And the last couple of years has been all about AI and figuring that out. And so maybe we'll start with Tim Van Meegen. Say a little bit about you, and then we'll toss it over to John, and then Tim number two.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, Tim Van Mieghem. I'm with the Pro Action Group, and we focus on operations. How do we fill demand? How do we do it well? And not only serve our customer, but really also serve our employees.
How about you, John?
John Lanier, founder of Middle Market Methods. We're in our 20th year of supporting private equity firms and their portfolio companies in the lower middle market. We specialize in remediating growing pains on a robust, sustainable basis, and it falls in four buckets typically. Planning to make sure we're aligned on the same things for the same reasons. How do we feed the engine that creates the value? That's a revenue statement. Could be an acquisition one. Operations, and sometimes that includes referring it to my friend Tim because it's lean. And by the way, on the feed, sometimes that'll entail referring it to Tim, who's a marketing specialist. And then the last thing is people. Stewards of whether you feed it or digest it, it's people. So how do you have a good talent pipeline to take care of these things from stem to stern? And that's what we do.
Tim, tell us about you and your business.
I am Tim Padgett. I'm with the Pepper Group. I founded it 31 years ago. We just had our anniversary. I can't believe it when I say it out loud. It's amazing. Our team is a full-service B2B marketing team. We have about 42 clients, 23 of which are private equity-owned portcos, and the rest want to be. And so we really understand how to help a company grow through better communications, both on traditional marketing, but also talent marketing, which has become a specialty of ours.
So let's get started with some of the questions we were considering. And I think if I'm listening as a potential CEO looking to exit and grow, the first question I want to jump into might just be like a quick win thing. And what I want us to think about is, what are some things you've seen people do in your areas that surprised you, that sort of like let's take a flyer on something, let's do something unusual, and lo and behold, it actually produced some pretty interesting results. I'm curious if you guys have an example of something like that we could put on the table.
I have a great one if I can go first.
Go for it, Tim.
As being somewhat of an optimist, I'm more surprised when something doesn't work. But in general, we had a job that we did for Gerber Collision and Glass. They fix stents, and they have a rough time finding enough people. And they're one of the big four nationally. And because a lot of schools do not have auto body shop anymore or anything like that, they're not getting young blood to come and join them. And so they have to steal from each other. And so what we did is we developed, first of all, some videos that really let their managers talk about what it's like to work there. But we also, in social media, we developed a calculator. They told us that they have a benefits program and a compensation program that's very unique and very generous. And so we started to develop a way in which we could put this little calculator on all their social media. It asked for two things. One was how how many hours do you bill on the average day, and what do you make per hour? And it would instantly provide a number that would more often than not say, with Gerber, you would earn $456 more a month, or whatever the number was. And I think that was really interesting because the person who was curious at that point could see where that would mean a lot to him and his family. And that would entice him to reach out. And well, the curious part of it was that it worked really good. I mean, we just didn't realize how good that was going to work. We were thrilled, as was the client, of course. But for literally years, they'd been struggling to get enough applicants for their growth.
Yeah.
And we turned it around pretty quick.
That's interesting. And it's funny. I think one of those, I think you mentioned kind of focusing on people. That's one of those things that I don't know if it goes overlooked, but it's such an important lever for a business, and getting that right can be a really big deal. So it's maybe not surprising that it was so successful. Black swan looking through the rearview mirror. John, how about you? Any surprising things for you that kind of had outsized returns from what you expected?
First, I want to throw you a knuckleball. I have so much mileage on my odometer. I'm more surprised by what people eschew that is proven by science than I am things that surprise me that they work. But not to disappoint, given the question you posed, I'm going to put it in the category of humans. And that's the Almighty's joke on the world, is that if people could be disintermediated with algorithms, and that may be done yet with AI, we could run everything with machines. One of the things that I do a lot, and it's sort of off the grid, is executive coaching. Typically, it's high pots for whom a lot of frustration is registering with a leader who cannot seem to get through to them. And there are things you do, and it's a lot like boxing. You spar a while until you can land the right punch. And in my case, I learned something that I think is very valuable to all leaders, is you cannot help somebody who does not want to be helped. And in this particular case, the boss wanted this person to succeed them in running the place, but they thought it was a fait accompli, not something to be earned. And after sparring around for several rounds, it just occurred to me that I needed to be a little more blunt, if you will. And I offered to, actually, I didn't offer. I made a statement I was going to resign the engagement. And it really got the person all off balance. I said, why? I said, well, you impressed me that this is a check the box exercise, and that's not what the boss is paying for. So I'm just not going to risk my brand on you blowing this off. So I wish you well. And, but otherwise I'm not taking that risk. And it really was the point of inflection for that person. And you might think, well, they hated my guts. They actually became a really, really good reference, because after it was all over and the position was earned, they recognized that had somebody not challenged them in such a direct way, it was professional, but I assure you it was very clear that they would have never gotten there. And it would have perhaps made an indelible stain on that person's career. I was very happy about that. We don't do that every day, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. And he won, and he won for the right reasons, but it takes that sometimes.
That's really good. Tim, we lost you, but you're back. We were talking
Yes, I
about you're back with a vengeance. We were talking about anything from your career that you can think of that's sort of like a surprisingly outsized return for kind of what you thought something might actually produce once put in place.
Yes. And I'm going to go back to the basics a little bit on this. And the surprising part to me is that it's still such a major opportunity for companies. I remember thinking earlier in my career that, boy, this is all going to be done soon. Like now that we know this, we aren't going to, we're not going to run into this situation. And it's really first just simply understanding what your company is capable of doing, what you've already built, right? Not adding something new, not necessarily automating or whatever it might be, but simply understanding what's possible. And it starts with oftentimes it starts with walking through the process, getting curious, walking through and understanding what happens. And then, yeah, and when this typically comes up, it doesn't typically just randomly happen. It might happen during an M&A transaction where we look, even if nobody's been asking the question. Most of the time it comes because, oh my, our marketing work, thank God we brought in Tim and the Pepper Group, because now our sales are going up, and now we got to fill them. And we can't, and we're like, we got to buy more equipment. We need a new factory, whatever it might be. Got to add people. We throw money and inventory at the problem. And unfortunately, some companies are able to do that. They've got the capital, so they throw the money and the people at the problem, and they never stop to look. And it is almost without exception that, I should just say this, it's very common that the company doesn't have a true understanding of their capacity. And when we do go through it and do study it, how often we're able to increase the throughput, the velocity of filling to customer demand or whatever the customer demand is today. And like just one quick example, it's one of my favorites, but we had a client that processes salmon, and they landed Sam's and Costco in the same quarter. It literally doubled sales overnight. And a couple of months after that, after the parties and the celebrations, they're like, oh no, now we got the second worst problem. Like the hardest problem is not to have demand. Now we got too much. And how do we do it? We got a chance to tour the facility, and they hired us to say, could you fit enough equipment in here so we don't have to buy a new plant? Well, and I'm going to oversimplify it a bit, but we went through the whole operation, each step along the way. And we said, if we're going to meet the new customer demand, this operation has to operate at this pace. Is it possible? And 8 weeks later, not only did they satisfy all the demand, but they went from a 7 to a 5-day work week.
Wow.
$10,000 in CapEx, which was really just maintenance work. But it was that, and there's a lot of fun stories with it, but that is what's possible. Oftentimes.
Isn't that funny? Because I think that with most companies, with growth comes knee-jerk investments and reactions to how they should behave. And there's sort of a conventional wisdom about it that seems right.
Yes.
Well, like we have more business. We've doubled the business. Therefore, don't we need double the warehousing, double
right.
everything?
Exactly.
And they never think it through. I feel like that's something that we see all the time. And I'm curious. I bet you guys, I see some nodding heads there. I feel like we've all seen that a little bit. And so maybe a lesson, if you're listening, I think a lesson is that, growth means honestly like a revisit of the strategy. Yes. And make sure that, well, let's think about what we're trying to do here. And is there a way to accomplish it sometimes? And Tim's being a little bashful here, but I feel like I've heard you say something like, if you were to guess, every company has 30% capacity that they don't even know about, and they assume is not there.
Yes.
Right.
It's very common. It's very common that sometimes accidentally they do have a pacing aspect of their operation that forces them to work at a certain pace, but it is rarely, it's way less common, less common.
It's funny. So we're working on on coining a new term on our side of the world that we're going to call digital scrap. And when I look at what the equivalent is in our side of the world, where people are blowing a day on copying and pasting things in spreadsheets, and I know everyone listening has salespeople that go home and do a spreadsheet for a quote until 9 at night, and their families are tired of it, and like there's so much waste on the digital side of things. And when I think about something for us that's one of those really outsized returns, I think about a lot of what we do ends up being basically like innovation. So how do we rethink what we're doing to do things a little more efficiently? And that usually means a new idea, right? And so one of the struggles of being within the four walls is what you know is what you've done, right? And so usually what we hear when they innovate on their own is just a kind of better, faster mousetrap a little bit. So we're going to use our same old ideas. And I got to tell you, one of the best ideas we ever had, and so this is the takeaway is listen to your new people. So we had a really new person on the sales team at a client who came in, and when you think about it, when you first come in, like your first day on the job is when you're most excited, kind of most engaged, like everything's great, and you probably sit down, for lunch, and there's someone that's been there for 20 years who slumped over, and like they got to him, right? But this new person hadn't had a chance to drink the Kool-Aid and just was asked those questions, kind of like, well, why do we do that? And we were in a session trying to like optimize what their sales team was doing, and we had five of them and this other person, and each one of the five people did in their digital world, in their ERP, did the process to create a new sales order differently. And the reaction, like honestly, one of the guys, as soon as he clicked the button, 3 or 4 people, that's what you do. Wait, don't do that. And so like just getting everyone together, and this new person's like, well, why don't we do it this way? It would save us like, 4 or 5 steps, and you've got 6 tabs open. And how does your brain not explode? And it was one of those kind of emperor's new clothes kind of things where all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, I guess so. And honestly, we were probably going to recommend that, but when it comes from inside, it's so much more powerful. And so I really feel like that, take advantage. When people come to our company, I want to hear right away, okay, how'd your old company do security? How'd your old company do deployments? All that kind of stuff. Because when they've been there 6 months a year, they're part of our machine now. But I feel like there's a lot to be gained. I'm curious if you guys have ever experienced that in your travels.
Your dialogue fits a very predictable change management model, and it may be a good place to introduce it here. Is that any change is evil until those affected at least see why it's not bad, but preferably good, and it tends to be explained in some combination of 4 root causes. 1, it may threaten turf. 2, it may reveal a skill set no one has, which could be remediated with training. You sort of touched on that. You definitely touched on what we call cultural inertia, which the tell is, but we've always done it this way. Okay, cavemen do, but cavemen aren't around anymore. Uh, and the last one is, and this one, even the academics don't exactly acknowledge this one because it's not PC, is the baggage we bring to work because we have lives outside of work. And it can come in various manifestations. It's impossible to leave at home. It could be the sick kid, a death in the family, financial troubles, you name it, but it's broad. And it is unwise for any leader to think there's a true firewall between our personal lives and how it affects the corporate dynamic. But there are a couple of skill sets in all this relative to change that I have a lot of respect for. Change management, which the mortar and all that is EQ. How do you read your audience? But also the methodology, and this is actually a lot of all 3 of our models, all 4 counting you, and it's project management. How do you orchestrate complexity in large quantities in a critical path to get where you think you have to be when you thought you would get there? And the Gantt chart, I think, is one of the best inventions in the human race. So you touched on a lot of stuff that I recognized as change management.
It's honestly such a great point, because I think a lot of what we all do is we can see over the chasm to where you want to get to, but we got to bring all 500 of your team along with us, right? And I think honestly, I mean, we probably ignored change management for the first half of the life of our company, and it was just so clear. Why don't you just do it? And I almost feel like a lot of people are wired up to think, let's just quote unquote just do it. And to your point, those four factors were so great. I mean, we'll have you go deeper into that, but I think that's really, overcoming, turf and inertia, and we've always done it. um, I feel like one of the things that you have to, it almost goes without saying, from leadership, it's got to be, kind of, this is where we're going, but also why it's great for you, why this matters to you, why this will be better for you. Because, you know, because for the investors and the CEO, if I double and I walk home with 100 million, that's not a story for the rest of the team.
I want to one up you on that one, Mike. Not only certainly talking about the why and including everybody in kind of your vision. The next big piece, the next level up is, you get the vision, but as quickly as possible, you get out of the way. How can you use the opportunity to improve as an excuse to start developing your team? The one of the things I think that we are, I'll say this, I'm realizing it more and more. Other people have probably been there for a long time. Um, that companies are not necessarily in the business of serving their customers. They're in the business of developing leaders who serve their customers. If you can develop leaders who are developing leaders in your company, use these opportunities to improve as an excuse to develop those teams, those self-directed teams. That's when your company
Yeah.
can scale.
That's such a great point. And I think if anything, for me, there's always an embedded idea that the only way for there to be leaders who can create new leaders is if there's growth and places to put you, so if we don't grow, we kind of don't need more leaders, really, or we need succession, et cetera, but we don't need, the tree to grow. I don't know, Tim Padgett, what do you think about this idea?
Well, I'm going to take a communication stand on this in that um, when you get fresh ideas from people who have just joined your company, sometimes you can say, hey, we tried that. It doesn't work in our company because of this and that. And you may be right. But they have so much to offer. And in fact, at our company, we have 8 core values, and they're really built around giving people freedom of contributing and sharing and so forth. And we even built a tool for one of our clients where it's an animated tool, but it's used for a 60-day review. So onboarding review. And it gives them the opportunity, instead of sitting in front of a manager and probably being very self-conscious about your performance over the last 60 days, because you always want to be better than you are and you're your worst uh, audience. But this allows them to go home and experience answering certain questions. It gives them the chance to calmly express their views, what they've noticed, how they can change things if allowed. And it also starts to collect data. So if you have a company of 1,000 people and you have turnover rate of 15%, you've got 150 new people coming into that company every year. And are you really asking them vital questions? Are you giving them an opportunity to say, hey, I've experienced this before, or I saw a new way that we might be able to approach this, or hey, this place isn't doing too well. I don't feel like I'm welcome. All those things, right? But you're not sitting in front of a manager quaking a little bit and having that one chance. And that manager is usually not writing things down. And they're not collecting data that could be used going forward as to which departments are better at training their people early on, or which managers are doing a better job at it. So I like the freedom of communication for newbies when they come in. Don't stifle them. Don't say, this is the way we've always done it. And I've been there. I've probably said that, somewhere in my career, because I didn't have a better answer at the time. And so hopefully companies are very open to listening to those newbies.
right, that's the end of part 1 of the roundtable with Tim, and John. And stay tuned next week. We're going to release part 2 then, and look forward to hearing how this all ends up. There's some really great stuff in part 2.